outside the school where I am in Boston at the moment, where he's just started speaking.
Right, the majority of you. Right, now we're going to lock the doors, and it could be a long evening, all right? Listen, that's great. That's exactly what I wanted to see, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to engage with people from right across the spectrum. There are people that vote UKIP who used to be Conservative. There are people that vote UKIP who were Lib Dem. There are people who vote UKIP who've been Labour all their lives, and I think, crucially, there's an increasing number of people who vote UKIP who didn't vote in 2010, or in some cases haven't voted for 20 years, or in some cases have never voted in their lives. And that's because they see us as a party that's got the courage to stand up and say what most decent people think and the other politicians ignore. And we had a tremendous boost to our campaign yesterday because Tony Blair decided to get back involved in politics. And I've got to tell you, I'm enormously grateful for Mr Blair to tell us that the European Union is absolutely vital to Britain's interests and therefore there should not be a referendum. This, by the way, is the same Tony Blair who said we should join the euro, the same Tony Blair who promised us a referendum on the EU constitution, and the same Tony Blair who, of course, has made millions since he left office from the very corporate companies that benefit from the European way of doing business and making the rules. And Mr Blair says that no, there must be no discussion, there must be no debate on this issue. Well, I've got a message for Mr Blair. You can say what you want, and your new protege, Mr Miliband, can think he too can turn his backs on the British people having a say, but we demand to have our say. We demand to have the opportunity to get back control of our country and, crucially, control of our borders. That's what we want. Now, I've said that rather politely for me, but I suspect, had Mr Blair been with me today in Grimsby, looking at what used to be a great fishing harbour, and certainly had he come to meet Ken Bagley down on the river this afternoon, he'd have had a very different impression of what the European Union has done to places like Boston and places like Grimsby, where I was this morning. Do you know, across the other side of the North Sea, there's a country called Norway. She's a sovereign nation, she's not a member of the European Union, and she's got a 200-mile exclusive economic zone. All the fish that swim within that 200 miles are under the control of the Norwegian government. They have a big, active, thriving, booming fishing industry. They also run their own affairs properly. They're not subjected to European quotas. They're not throwing back dead, as British fishermen have now been doing for 3 decades in the North Sea, over 50% of what they catch. Everything has to be landed, and so they finish up with a fishery that actually doesn't just produce wealth, but is ecologically sustainable as well. And that, folks, is what we have given away. We have given away our territorial waters, we have given away our fish, we have given away perhaps the greatest renewable resource we possess as a country, the fish that swim in our seas. And what UKIP are saying is, we want our country back, we want our territorial waters back, and I want to come back in a few years to Boston and see that river rammed full of fishing boats with men and families earning their living from the sea, as they've done here for centuries. That's what we want, that's our ambition and our aim. But it's actually quite difficult to have this conversation with the other party leaders. Now, I did try last Thursday to do some of this. You might have watched the programme. And there was a woman in the front row, and she asked a very sensible question. She said, as members of the European Union, what can we do about immigration into Britain? And they all faffed and flailed around. They talked about perhaps cutting benefits, but what none of them addressed, apart, to be fair, from the leader of Plaid, who admitted it. What none of them want you to know, what none of them want to discuss and debate, is the fact that as members of the European Union, there is nothing we can do, because our British passport, the first two words on it are European Union. And that passport effectively now is owned by 485 million people. We have no ability to control the numbers coming to Britain. Now, let me be clear.
Nigel Farage there speaking to the party faithful on the campaign trail in Boston in Lincolnshire. Let's move on to other news now and more.